Hi, I'm Humza Teherany, Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer for Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. We're the organization that runs the Toronto Raptors, the Toronto Maple Leafs, Toronto FC, and many other teams, along with the entertainment concert company as well. And I'm really interested today to talk about how to drive innovation with AI, how to accelerate it, how to be strategic as business leaders and technology leaders, as well as the crazy, super nerdy stuff. I developed a group about a year ago called our V1 lab, our version 1 lab, which is our agentic development lab. And our V1 lab at MLSE allows us to drop in an idea on a Monday and have a full stack app latest by the end of that week. Usually the very first version, the 0.1, is within several hours. And that's because of the ability to employ agentic development principles, which doesn't mean that you don't use vibe code. You don't know what you're doing, or you don't look at security aspects. You don't plan out your work. You're not using MD files or, planning mechanisms or MCPs or all these other technical things that you would do. So you still have to be a great developer, but if you can harness how to use it from a technical perspective, it is absolutely game changing. So for me, I've probably built 3 or 4 platforms as a full stack developer in our V1 lab, hand in hand with my own full stack developers. Now, keep in mind, I was a coder 25 years ago, and I was doing PHP, Perl, and ASP. So Microsoft.net. And that was a long time ago. And I was never a full stack developer, but now, whether it's authentication or database or back end or front end or design, which is even in the last 2 weeks, agentic design has progressed
What do you use?
immensely.
What tool do you use for that?
So the Claude released a paper on the Claude design skill,
Hmm.
their concept of how to encompass the design skill. And it fundamentally produces 100, in my opinion, 100% better design by just employing that skill.
Yeah.
And the second one is Gemini 3 Pro preview, I guess, is incredible at front end design.
Hmm.
Incredible, absolutely incredible front end design.
But
So
hang on, make the business case, Hamza. Because I think even the framing of we built 3 full stack apps, soup to nuts, Monday to the end of the week. You find the ROI there, right? Why is that? I mean, I'm amazed. But if I'm a senior leader in another kind of classic business, what is the impact of that? Why would I want to stand up a lab that can create full stack apps in a week? Like, what's the business impact?
yeah, I think the opportunity is, imagine, maybe the best way for me to describe it is this way. Everybody has ideas. Everybody in an organization has ideas. Well, what if half of your organization or a third of your organization has the ability to take an idea and bring it to life in near real time, right? Think of how long it takes people to do research, to do analysis, to do decks, to sell ideas, to figure out what the next big thing is, what the next efficiency idea is. It could be anything. It could be margin and EBITDA growth. It could be net new revenue growth. It could be fan experience. And, I think ideas are wonderful and amazing, and everybody's got ideas, but it's always been in business about what you do with those ideas. So now we've got capability inside our organization that can bring ideas to life within hours. And you're not done in hours. This is not a magic pill. It just helps you go a lot faster to determine whether you've got a winning idea or a non-winning idea, in which case you should move on. So we've done a lot of work on those kinds of concepts.
To what extent is it a requirement of a leader that they are capable of going deep? So, because there's a model that says, hey, I've got to delegate AI to somebody who gets it, right? I mean, you're in the C suite, right? And there's a model that says the C suite's job is to delegate to somebody that gets it. Whereas
Yeah.
you, to me, this archetype of a C suite leader capable of strategic thinking and deploying organizational resources and stuff, you're also running terminal via CLI on your personal device at all,
Yeah.
right? So, can you talk for a second about whether that is essential, whether it's nice to have, how you think about that skill set?
I think about a year and a half ago, I transitioned back to my, 25 year ago technical self. And I think as you grow in your career, especially in the tech space in a company, sometimes you start really technical and then you grow into the business side of things and you lose those technical skills. And I always maintain the technical skills of development and kind of hacking around at things throughout my, the back half of my career. I'd say more as a C-suite executive. I've been a CEO, chief strategy officer, chief technology officer, chief digital officer. I've had a lot of different kinds of roles. But a year and a half ago, just thinking about all of the enhancements that were coming out on consumer AI is really what got me back into it. And I was on vacation with my wife and my daughter, and I had about 10 days to disconnect, and I really didn't disconnect. But I started just kind of
It
like
was 10 days to
reading.
reconnect, not disconnect,
Yeah,
but reconnect. Yeah.
I mean, it was just like personal passion project where it started, and it was, learning about what ChatGPT was doing just from a consumer perspective. And then I looked into Claude and, looking at all these other models that were coming out. And then probably 2 months into kind of like really going deep on all the consumer tools and trying all the consumer tools, which included things like Lovable and Bolt, being able to kind of like just build fast prototypes. I was like, man, I gotta get back into the models. I gotta get back into understanding how this, like, how does an LLM actually work and how's it built? What does it mean for software? And then in and around that time, Claude Code, actually Claude Code was much later. I think it was Cursor, Windsurf, getting kind of back into VS Code and kind of operating these things inside VS Code. And it really, it took off from there. And I've spent probably since then, I'd say probably 2 hours at minimum per day learning. And my learning comes from, I'm a hands-on learner. I wasn't a great student in school because memorization is tough for me even now. But I'm a great hands-on learner is what I discovered later in my life, my professional life more so. So for me, it was all about just trying things, building things, getting back into it. And a lot of my self-training has come through YouTube and X. X just for like what people are doing, what they're finding, what the latest innovations are, especially around AI and agentic
Can I ask
coding
you a
now.
question then on because I think this is very important because I think a lot of people in C-suite often, don't necessarily use AI as much as they promote other people should. And there
Yeah.
does seem to be this kind of magic that appears when you have a lot of domain expertise and then you increasingly understand when these models are good at that. And there seemed to be this kind of like step function you can do where obviously first you become very good at using one of the foundation models within a chat service like ChatGPT. But then a lot of people that I know that are very into this and are getting very good at it then start to kind of understand how to, for example, use something like Claude Code or Cursor or some of these more, technical tools. Would you help me try to describe kind of like how do you go from, okay, I know ChatGPT, I've been using it in a browser, to maybe go to, I now have installed the desktop version and I have added my first function so it can now look through my drive or another thing that's easy to, I now have Claude Code installed too. Now I know what Cursor is. And how would you see that kind of like journey for people who might not even have a technical background?
I think it's such an interesting question. I was having this similar debate with my head of engineering this actually last week on should we just start putting some of our more technical people, some of our more technically savvy people inside the CLI? Because
Just
if
to
you,
explain to what CLI is for most people who don't
yeah,
know this.
command line interface where you can run, if you have the Claude desktop app or you have the OpenAI app on your phone or on your desktop, think of the command line interface as just being directly in the guts of it. And you can still ask questions and go back and forth. And her perspective was, it might be too technical. And my perspective was, you're probably right, but there probably is a subsection of people that would benefit from that. But to answer your question directly, I think it's a progression. I think, these things can be daunting. The pace of change can be daunting. The technical terms can be daunting. I think you do have to have a technical understanding of how these things work. So from the progression aspect of kind of mastering these things as you go, I would say, master the consumer stuff first. Like learn what Claude is good at and what OpenAI, ChatGPT is good at. Learn the consumer aspects of what you could do inside those platforms. I think specifically those two platforms, and Gemini's, really incredible for a lot of things. I think they're getting a lot better on the consumer side too. But I would say, first step one is learn how it works. Like just And the beauty of it is you can do all of these things right inside any of these chatbots, right? You can go in it and say, like literally, like this might sound dumb, but like, in the early days, I was going in and asking it, like, explain to me very simply, how does LLM training actually work? Because I wanted to refresh my memory and I didn't want to go read a technical journal. You could ask it anything. And sometimes you feel a little bit silly asking it maybe basic questions or refresher questions, but it's just an unlimited amount of learning that you can do directly in these apps that are now sitting at our fingertips. So I
You
would
now
say,
you have an AI tutor. You have an AI tutor in your
yeah,
hands. Yeah.
learn the basics, master the public apps that are out there. Once you've done that, I think you can kind of cross the chasm to potentially getting into VS Code, running Cursor, running Claude Code, or running Codex, or running Gemini, right?
Okay, but hang on one second here. Before we go there, or before we cross the chasm, make the business case, because I think they're cross it. Yeah, Henrik words on the other side of the chasm.
Yeah, I love it.
So one thing, but for you just said you're a C-suite leader. You spend 2 hours per day hands-on learning. If you just assume you work 8 hours a day, which you don't, that's 25% of your
Yeah.
time. And
Yeah.
from a senior leader perspective, the opportunity cost of that time is enormous, right? Your time is far more expensive than other people's, right? And I think a lot of people, a lot of senior leaders especially, cannot justify investing in learning because the opportunity cost of their time is so high. So could you please, for people who don't know what the ROI is, so to speak, can you make the business case of the value of, and what I'm asking you to do is kind of humble brag. What's been the impact to the business that you have made because you've gone so deep? Because I think that would really help people justify, I need to personally spend time, even though it's a high opportunity cost. Humble brag, go ahead.
Yeah. Great question. The 2 hours a day is not during work hours. It's actually in personal time. So it's in my drive in or in my train ride in, and obviously weekends and evenings, because obviously, day jobs, especially if you're a leader in an organization, is busy. You can't just carve out 2 hours a day to go do side projects, right? So I would say the reason I've done that and the reason I will continue to do that for the foreseeable future is because I think these technologies, whether you use consumer versions of them to be better at your job, to be more impactful in what you're doing, or you want to understand it at a great degree because you might maybe want to be a founder or develop something that's incredible, is that these technologies have changed the world and they will continue to change the world. Included in that are legacy businesses that have been around forever. And it doesn't really matter if you're a food service company or a cleaning company or a sports and entertainment organization or a TV network. These things are fundamentally going to change and have changed how business is done. I think the opportunity is for most organizations is to adopt and understand. And I think the human side of it is probably the hardest part, which is kind of helping people and organizations understand the value and getting them to switch and change and operate in a different way, which is just human behavior. So change is hard. And I think this is, it's no different with these technologies. But that's the reason why. The reason why is because it's changed everything. And for me personally, I've now been able to build full stack apps for MLSE. And, I developed a group about a year ago called our V1 Lab.
Can you give a few examples of like what the V1 lab kind of like,
Yeah.
what do they come up with and how do they then actually have real impact into the organization?
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
maybe one winning idea and one idea that you learned wasn't winning would be kind of cool.
Yeah. I think the one winning concept we've employed now is we built a platform just titled MLSE AI, and it's kind of our AI homepage. It's kind of our landing spot. And we have probably about 12 different AI apps that we've built in there. And in MLSE AI, we also have an app called IdeaGen. And IdeaGen is, if you guys remember Dig, do you remember the website Dig?
Yeah.
From a long time ago, made by a guy named Kevin Rose.
I hear they're coming back,
so-
but that's a different story.
Yeah. So Dig is, is a simple concept where people can go and post stuff, kind of like Reddit, but you're able to, upvote and downvote ideas. And that was a concept of Dig a very long time ago. So we took similar concepts to that and have actually recently launched IdeaGen out to all of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. and it allows anybody in the organization to go put in an idea, and it allows other people to vote on the idea. So, just that small change means that the ideas now have the opportunity to grow from anywhere, to get supported from anywhere, and the best ideas will grow to the top. These are not necessarily ideas about AI. These are business ideas. It could be anything. They could be from our usher on the front line to our server in the restaurant to the CEO of the company. It could be anybody. And I think these things are incredibly democratizing of bringing the right information up. But also then once every quarter, we might do it once every month, but we've decided on every quarter, is we take the top 3 ideas and we do what we call build in a day. And so on one day, we take those 3 ideas and the people who came up with those ideas, and we sit in a room for the entirety of the day. In fact, our first build in a day is coming up in 2 weeks. And there's 3 people, 1 person building each idea, just
How
on that
cool.
one day. And
How
then we have a
cool.
demo day the next morning. Now, I and Sandra, who's my VP of engineering, are both builders for Build in a Day, right? Along with one of our agentic developers that sits in our B1 lab. So our concept with that is that you could do anything, or you got to pick the right thing to work on, right? It's critically important to pick the right one. On your other question of, what did we get that isn't right? Well, I think we started off some time ago building almost micro apps. So there was an app for research. There might have been an app for analysis. There might have been an app for creating content, copywriting, all these kind of small things that, the LLMs are really good at, but you want to enable large groups of people to have these capabilities. And we've learned that it's got to be more of like a software as a service kind of experience where you go in to do a set of tasks associated to your job. So one example of where we pivoted from that is we've created a platform called MLSE Deep Dive. And the Deep Dive platform allows you to go into the platform and brainstorm any idea. So you're able to go in there and basically say, you create a project and you say, I want to figure out, I want to research all of the different LLMs and I want to figure out the best one to use. And you could just go crazy doing research back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Once you build that context, or it could be launching a brand new business idea, could be anything. Once you build all the context, which you might build in an hour, in a day, in a month, we then take all of that context and send it to a deep research capability that we've built and custom provided instructions to in terms of what we're trying to get answers to. And then it actually produces a report that's very contextual to our industry, sports and entertainment, with all the context and all the deep research. And then you can start to take that report and stick it into a really beautiful presentation format and do things like add images to it and other things that you might want to, and just kind of keep iterating. So the concept is you're able to take an idea that you might have in your head, build on it over a period of time, just like you would if you were in a company with colleagues, going to meetings, spitballing ideas with other people, maybe going to the development team and saying, could you do this? Or going to the marketing team and saying, could you think about how we might do this particular thing? But you're just doing it in this contained environment. And then you're also able to produce marketing material. So you're able to produce posters, imagery, app mock-ups. So now you can enrich your idea. And we created a version of V0 as well internally. So if anybody's used the Vercel V0 app, which allows you to go in and instruct it with a whole bunch of things, and it produces like really beautiful kind of in the moment conversational based
Can I ask
creative.
quick questions on the ideas that,
Yeah.
so the challenge for many, I would assume, is increasingly that the tools themselves can do a lot, but they can
Yeah.
do so much that they become a little bit numbing for people that are not used to think like this. And so in many ways, it seems what you guys are providing is obviously access to the technology, but increasingly you're kind of showing people process or ideas for what they can actually use this tool. Like the stuff that you're doing is as much a use case as it is a piece of software. Is that how you think
Correct.
about it?
We think about it as similar to how we thought about software pre-AI, which is It's got to be solving a problem. It's got to have product market fit. We got to be picking it was much more expensive to do these things 2 years ago, but you're still spending, cycles with people's minds and energy, and you want to focus those in the right area. So it's exactly that, Henrik. I think it's picking the right ideas, doubling down on the things that can scale. And Jeremy, maybe going back to your ROI question, if you can pick the right things and have people work on the right ideas and have kind of the human side of it, non-technical side of it, join with the technical side of it, then at the end of that, you might have somebody say, wow, this new thing we've developed is amazing. I used to do this in all these manual ways, and now I can do it in one place. And those are mainly the non-technical users that will provide that feedback very quickly because they'll see the value in it. I think that's when you're kind of hitting the impact stuff. And I would say this isn't the crazy cutting edge stuff, as you guys know. This is just like what are you going to do that's basic day to day to help your organization to grow? Better research, better analysis, faster prototyping, faster presentations. You can spend that 80% of the time on other things that are much more value added, growing your business, coming up with the next big bet.
Well, one thing I
Right.
also think about when you're mentioning these is, and this might be just super obvious, and so we can ignore what it is, but I think we talked to another person the other day who's saying he believes basically like 10-15% of the organization are now these super users of AI. They're really good at it. And then they can basically do a lot of the stuff we talk about. And then you have the remaining that is still kind of like climbing up the learning ladder.
Right.
It seems that for a lot of like the non-super users, it's almost better for them to give them, to your point, a tool that it doesn't really even have to be about AI. It is just,
Yeah.
hey, you're a salesperson that's selling sponsorships, and
Correct.
here's like a very easy way for you to make your
That's
deck
it.
ready for when you go out and
Yeah.
sell. You're saving 2 hours, and like, like almost like not pitch it as AI, but just here, like
Yes.
all these
Bang
new
on.
tools that we made.
Bang on, Henrik. I think that's key. It's almost like the AI. I think the AI for the technical people and nerds is really interesting. We could talk about it for a long time. But for somebody who's not technical, they just want to know, like, how's it going to help me do my job better? And if you could just almost take out AI from the commentary, and exactly as you said it, here's a tool, use it. It should help you go faster. And if you've done your job as a technologist or somebody who's looking to move the organization forward, the answer on that should be like, oh yeah, I could do my job way better in this, right? And it just works.
So then there's a really important point. And Henrik, I'm so glad that you drilled in here. What we have not heard you say, Humza, up to this point is talking about broad enterprise adoption. We haven't heard you talk about training. We haven't heard you talk about others learning to work with AI. What we've heard is a centralized function that is AI enabled, that is unleashing the organization with stuff they need versus equipping the organization with AI tools and then letting them figure it out. Are we hearing that correctly? I'm not hearing you talk about driving it.
I think for us, it's somewhere in the middle. We have rolled out access to AI tools for large groups of people in the organization. We have training programs, and we have access to various kinds of things that people can use to enhance their skills. My personal learning in the last year and a half, 2 years on this has been, it's really hard to get people to change at scale in general terms. So if you're giving everybody a ChatGPT license and saying, here's AI, be better, it's actually really hard because, like, what am I supposed to do in here?
Right.
And if you're technical, maybe you know all the answers to that. But if you're anywhere, under very technical, you might be looking at that and going, it's probably just easier for me to do this in my spreadsheet.
Maybe the reason to give people access is not to upgrade everybody. It is to find those 10-15% who might be hidden around the organization. And
so that's our concept around our MLSE AI platform, which is, if you're in our partnership group or if you're in our marketing group or you're doing any kinds of idea or a generation of new concepts that are creative and beautiful, or you want to think of anything new or report or whatever, this is where you go to do it, right? Those are the concepts that we're trying to double down on, which is for things like research and analysis and deck building and assessing a spreadsheet and doing all of those kinds of things. Here's where you go to do it. And I think those opportunities have a much higher potential to grow fast. We've built an agentic media access platform, which allows us to do basically video editing. And it's connected into, imagine how much footage we have across our NBA teams or NHL teams. We're a very old organization in terms of all the footage that we have. So now our platform allows you to go in and through natural language allows our producers to search for anything. And you can search for anything, find anything very instantly. And then you can also clip together certain clips to export to an XML to put into your video editor of choice and just get content out there faster. So natural language video search is kind of an important one for us as a sports entertainment media company. We went big on that one. In fact, last year, our teams that built that won the NBA Innovation Award on behalf of the Toronto Raptors by the NBA because of what we did with that platform. It was fundamentally looking at video and production and just shrinking the time to get content out to a fan, to a partner, to the market, social, et cetera, television, partnerships, et cetera, by orders of magnitude. So I do think that there is an element of you want in any organization, you want your workforce to be AI enabled and trained, of course. It takes time. I think the fastest ROI is pick your top, you guys both said it, pick your top 2, 3, 4 things and just make sure you get those 2, 3, 4 things. And whether you do that in a quarter or a year, it's all good. Just do that well and you'll get the progression, just like most other tech platforms or programs that people would have done a decade ago.
So I want to give you this magic wand. Here it is. So you can have it. And
Thank
what I
you.
want to ask you to do, if you wave the magic wand, you're given kind of a blank slate. The CEO of another company says, we want to set ourselves up for success. From an org design perspective, what do you suggest is the right structure? And specifically, where does this capability sit? Because in some organizations, it's kind of nested in marketing. In some, it's the CHRO. Some, it's, IT. Where do you think the capability sits? Where does it report? And what does it have responsibility for?
Yeah, I think a role like this needs to report into the CEO, or frankly, be the CEO. I think it's got to be very close to the top person and the top people. And everybody has to understand what the capabilities are. Because, to where we started the conversation off, this conversation isn't just for the nerds. This conversation, in my opinion, is for everybody to some degree at this level. Because even if you don't understand hands-on keys on these things, you want to understand the macro concepts of what these things mean and how you could enable it, even if you can't build it yourself, how you could enable it if you're the CEO of a company. Because if you don't, then you won't understand and you will be left behind in your organization orders of magnitude faster than any other time in sort of modern day technology, just because of the speed at which these things move. And those companies that adopt it will move faster and faster. And if you don't adopt it, ultimately you will move slower and slower on these things.
And so you say report to the CEO. What
Yeah.
kind of can you talk for a second about, okay, how do you interface with marketing, for example? I mean, just to get
Yeah.
very specific, how do you interface with HR, right? What's marketing's responsibility versus this role's responsibility, et cetera, et cetera?
So it's back to what we talked about with the ideas. We get lots of ideas from our executives inside MLSE, so my peers, our CHRO, our chief marketing officer, our chief operating officer, all of these incredible people have awesome ideas. And I'll give you a story. Shannon Hosford, our chief marketing officer, who came up with We the North from the Raptors campaign that is very well known and very award winning, said about a month ago, like, hey, it would be great if we, I saw this thing that somebody else has, and I wonder if we could do something with it. And it's kind of all these marketing agents talking to each other about just ideation. And there's like 5 or 6 agents speaking to each other. We might have a revenue person in there and a performance marketer and a data person, whatever. We're like, all right, that's actually a great idea. And we went out in a couple of days and we built it. And so then she takes it, puts it into her team, gets us feedback, and we start that loop. But that's when you have these things that really catch on, when you've got the end users in an organization really saying, hey, I have an idea. And that's what our idea gen platform is about, to kind of harness that at scale. But I think for any organization, the ideas are there.
How do you find and what do you measure a person on that you hire into your agent team?
So they have to be up to speed on all agentic development principles, which means that obviously they have to have great skills as a developer. They have to be able to write code and review code.
But do you really, do
and
you just put like a job specs, or like do you, and I ask because the only way that we've been able to find people these days is that I troll YouTube and I find people with like
yeah,
10,000
yeah,
followers, but not
Yeah.
25, and then basically DM them and ask, do you want to work with us? And often they have, a lot of skills, but not a lot of money. So they're like, sure.
It's a great way to do it. I don't think I have a magic bullet answer on it either, but I think what we do is we've been able to find some really great people, and it's people kind of like us who understand it, who have kind of the core skills and have chosen to take that right turn and go, okay, I'm not going to be afraid of this thing. It's not going to mean that if I don't write every line of code that I'm less of a developer. It just means I'm going to be so much better than everybody else around me as a developer, that I'm going to have greater opportunities to grow. Like it's kind of a personal thing around growth for, engineers and leaders, but we actually do put them through a set of tests that are really driven through agentic principles. We'll say, we have a particular idea on this. We'd like you to use Claude Code, Cursor, Codex, whatever you want. We'll provide you access to it. We'll give you the environment. We'll give you an hour. How would you do it? We want them saying, yeah, we would use, markdown files. We would use planning mode. We would build PRDs. We would use MCPs. We would employ the skills that are out there now from, if you're using Claude Code, whatever the thing is, we want to know that those people know which models to use, right? Because it's not one model that's going to do everything. So from a technical development standpoint, we want people harnessing the workflow. And we've also started to develop our own workflow package. Because if you can master that, then you're really at the bleeding edge of, you get all the business stuff done and get all the ideas. Then you got to have men and women, people that have the ability to take those ideas and fly, not irresponsibly, but responsibly. And, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that at some point we move things from prototype V1 lab to production. And we don't launch products out there that are vibe coded. In fact, we don't really vibe code. The way I describe it is, I'm adding some context engineering terminology now. I think vibe coding seems like you're just kind of hacking away with the chatbot without knowing what you're doing. That's contrary to what we do. I think you have to review code. I think you have to look at what you're doing. I think you have to be able to plan and architect. But ultimately, I compare it to a pilot flying a plane. If you were to observe a pilot flying a plane, very rarely would you see a pilot on a yoke steering the plane, right?
Right. In the rain, they're just like,
You see them in the movies, but a pilot knows what all those buttons are, when to press what, and knows how to operate it as efficiently and effectively given all the conditions that they are dealing with and the stress that they're dealing with. And I think agentic development, whatever word you want to give it, true agentic development with software skills is akin to that. And I don't have a word for it necessarily. And I think the words will continue to change, but those kinds of skill sets are absolutely game changing. Well, I think we'll see several billion-dollar companies created in the next 2, 3, 4 years with solo devs, because I think people have the ability to do it.
I also think it's unlock a new type of technologist, right? I think there are people that might not, as yourself, like I'm sure your coding chops are not up to scratch because it's been 25 years since you used them.
Yeah.
But you understand fundamental technical architecture. I mean, I come through a design background, but I have done my Python class, so like I understand the core elements. And I think people like myself and other systems thinkers that was never had the ability to build anything before,
Yeah.
I think now can, and I think to your point, can build quite robust systems while they won't be able to kind of like debug the whatever goes, but often they don't have to, because obviously the output is what's really matters. And if it's up and running and it's not breaking, then, like it's often fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the ability to put the pieces together and do it in a way that is still quality, I think is also going to be key. But
For sure.
just the models and the technologies around it are just getting so much better. Like if I think of a year and a half ago, some of the models that were out there that were, if you're writing React or TypeScript or whatever your language of choice is, right? You'd run into errors, you'd have bugs, you have to spend time debugging. Now, you look at a model that just, like an Opus 4.5, it's amazing what it can do. Now it's not perfect, but you'll be dealing with a lot less bugs and issues if you can kind of harness this. So I think the future on the ability to create is massively different than it was 2 years ago. And I think it's all about the idea. It's what you put into that creation mechanism and what you get out of the other side. If you can figure out the biggest things that might change your business. The other thing I would just throw out there, Jeremy, which I think is a bit to your earlier question on what are the most important things. I think people have to think about if they were building their company today, how would they build it? I think you have to, whether you do that in an actual sense in the company and you go, okay, we're going to restart our company from today. 50-year-old company, 60-year-old company. Part of what we think about in various areas of our business, and in fact, across our business, is if we were starting our company today, how would you build it? Knowing all the things.
That's the important thing, right? Knowing all the things is actually critical.
Right.
And you can't imagine how to rebuild if you don't have that foundational
Correct.
knowledge of what the capabilities are right now. Yeah.
When you sit as a C-suite member and you have that thought, which I 100% agree with, very fast we kind of get outside the bounds of AI, right? And you're asking foundational strategy questions about your company. What business is it in? All those different things, right? Things that I think we all will have to answer in the age of AI. How do you think about having that conversation with your colleagues in the C-suite and the CEO about, hey, yes, there are technology components of here, but this will require us to potentially re-architecture the design of the organization and other things that are not necessarily
Yeah.
technical, but will be affected by the technology?
I think it's fairly easy to get there. And the way in which I've learned is the easiest way to get there. All of the mechanisms to get there take work is going back to what a company is built to do, what their existing, forget AI, forget about technology. What is that company trying to do this fiscal year? What are their shareholders expect? What are the goals of the company? What are all the executives aiming to do already? And then I think if you can back it into that, there's the greatest opportunity to have support on whatever those initiatives are, because it's not a side technology project or this AI thing. It's fundamentally connected to the thing that everybody's already aiming at. And then I think from there, you have greater opportunities to think about how you would reimagine something completely. And that takes sponsorship right from the top, sometimes from a board. But I also think that most boards and most CEOs are thinking about those things already. And I think these things sort of have a natural progression to come together. But I do think it always needs to start with the company, the vision, what the company's trying to do. And then you do need a technologist, somebody who can straddle both sides, which is what I love about my job is for, the majority of my back half of my career, my management side of my career, I straddle the line in between cutting edge technology and business growth. And I think putting the two things together that's the inspiration on what I do and why I continue to love what I do in this area, because when you can bring those two things together and you can actually see companies grow, there's nothing better from a professional standpoint.
Maybe that's kind of the perfect place to wrap, because we talked about where this role would sit, in an ideal world. We haven't talked about who, if you're advising a CEO who goes, I want to hire this person, I want to hire this capability in, who are you looking for? What are the key skills? And you kind of hinted at it a little bit, and I just described yourself, but if you could specify, what are the search parameters what a senior leadership team is looking for if they want to start to embed this capability?
In terms of the person that they need to bring in to help to drive
Yeah,
and play that role, well, I
bingo.
think it needs to be somebody deeply technical. I think it needs to be somebody deeply technical to understand all of the detail of how you do it. And that's the first part. You have to know, like, if you're in an organization leading technology, in 2025 going into 2026, I do think you have to lead by example on these things. Because if you don't know the detail of how it's done, then that's a big gap. Number two is I think it has to be a person who can build teams and hire great people to run those functions and achieve the best out of whether you have a team of 2, 3, 5, or 500. I think the efficiency factor of one single full stack developer has increased by 1,000%. but you have to know how to fly that plane to do it, from our previous example. So you have to have somebody who can understand it and then build system-wide thinking from a technical perspective inside the organization to actually execute. And the third one, which is the most important one, which I'd probably put maybe first, is somebody who can bridge the gap between all of that stuff of what I just said and make it absolutely unimportant to everybody else in the business, right? The most important thing is, hey, what are your ideas? How should we think about this? And if the person says, well, I don't really know what's going on out there to figure this out in a different way, that person needs to be able to say, well, I kind of have a good idea about that. And let's have a chat about it.
Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you kind of have to go back to all right, you know what? I think somebody might say, we do 500 pieces of content every month. Oh, all right. Well, how do we do that? Right. And it's that, how do we? And if you get to the point where you land on it and you say, wow, well, we could do these 500 pieces of content 30% faster, let alone 80% faster, you now have an ROI, which you need in any company to keep going on these things. So I think those three things are really, really important. But the human side of it, the ideas, the demystifying the AI stuff, as complicated and as invigorating as it is, I think they are kind of two sides of the equation that are equally important.
Can I just throw in a last question? That is, what are some new kind of like experiments you're doing in your own personal life with the AI?
I have, I think going back to the command line interface and having that kind of always up and running on my phone, connected and on my development server at home is just the ability to think and create at a speed that I've never been able to. And it's all the way from thinking and ideating to building something small, testing something. I think those concepts are incredibly powerful. And sometimes it's almost like, how far can I take this? What else can I do? What else can I connect to it? I've started to think about ways that, financial planning, of my own financial planning and taxes and things like that, you can just rip through a command line interface by uploading your files in a private environment and not going online to do it somewhere.
I gotta just give you this, and which shows it's like a concrete thing that blew my mind. So I'm in the US on a visa, and it takes quite a lot of work to renew the visa. You have to answer literally 60 or 70 questions. A lot of them are like full tax return, stuff like that. And so I got the list of requirements and I've been having this visa for a long time. But it has to be done every 18 months on my specific visa. And so I got the requirements. I literally dropped it in Cloud Code, and I basically said, you have full access to my hard drive, which obviously have like my tax return, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Please just do as much as you can. And lo and behold, it just came back, and it pretty much filled out like 70% of the whole thing.
So cool.
It was so cool. I was like, okay, I didn't have to do that. Got the visa.
That's amazing.
When you SSH into your box at home to use Cloud Code, do you use Tmux to make sure that you don't lose the terminal?
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it. That's that's probably the biggest hack in that setup.
It's so cool, because otherwise, obviously, like, you're gone from it. So
Yeah.
So the big unlock for me when starting to use like Cloud Code to not just coding, but also like my workflows, is this morning exercise where I have Todoist running with an MCP server. And then I have basic Cloud Code review all my to-dos and pick stuff that has high confidence that it'll be able to solve for me. It puts it on this long list. Then I add more stuff to the list. And then I basically add it to spin up a bunch of sub agents to go and solve all these different tasks for me. And then I kind of do other stuff. And then throughout the day, I jump in and kind of correct the stuff that I have. I read Obsidian so I can have easy access to the Markdown files on my local machine. One thing that I haven't tried, but I was curious you have, is to create like a master agent that you can use as the one that deploy to subtask, to avoid you having 20 different tabs open, but just have one tab and then have that agent help you context switch or not. So have you done anything in that space?
I have a master agents.md file. And so all of the things that I want that are consistent across all of, because I actually use a mix of Claude Code as well as now Cursor, but I'm strictly in the CLI. And I just find Cursor Composer 1, which is their Cursor's own model, fine-tuned model. Might be a GLM fine-tuned model, but it's excellent and it's super fast. And then obviously Opus 4.5 is super smart.
Mind
Not
blowing.
blazing fast, but faster than Sonnet, I think sometimes. I guess depending on what you're doing. So that master agents.md file has all of my stuff in it. I'll give you an example. So I have a commute mode. So my commute mode is when I'm driving, I might have told Jeremy this when we met. When I'm driving or when I'm on the train, I have the ability through tmux running on my home server, access through Termux on my Android device, and I can just speak to it. So I put my mic on and I go, I'm thinking of this, or I need to do this or whatever. And then when I have commute mode on, I can actually just turn it off and put it in my pocket. And when it's done the response, it'll like speak it to me in my ear. So that's a workflow that I love.
Is that Terminus that you use on your Android? Or
No, I use what's called Termux on Android. So it's
that's just an app itself.
yeah, Termux is an app. It's been around a long time. I think it's open source, and I use that. Here, this is it running on my phone, right? So I've got multiple tabs of things. Let's see if this camera can pick it up. Each one of those tabs is not really, but it's multiple tabs. You have to trust me. So one is Cursor CLI. The other one is Claude Code. Could be a bunch of different instances that I'm running. So commute mode is amazing because I feel like I've got, a terminal running in my phone that's always on, that allows me just to communicate with it through voice and to get the responses back in natural language, just somebody talking right back to me. And I kind of switched back and forth, and it's really powerful. I found it to be very powerful. And the only other one I'd leave you with is, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and she's incredible, and she's going to do whatever she wants to do in the world. But she and I, over a period of time, and I'm teaching her some of this stuff because I think kids at a young age being able to learn how to bring ideas to life is going to be a next skill. Think of kind of vibe coding, but like if you have a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old that is able to kind of create ideas, I think is extremely powerful. So we've created an app for her that we use at bedtime sometimes, not all the time. And it's called Story World. And so Story World is connected to all the latest image gen models and all of the rest of it. And so she at nighttime can say, Daddy, I want a story about fill in the blank, a princess and a dragon, I don't know, in a valley somewhere that's magical. And so what we do is we actually custom create these stories, and
Awesome.
it obviously creates a story, but it also creates the image, and the images kind of look like her and her grandparents and her mom and me and others, right? Because we've done all of this in this one app. It's amazing to me the child can think of something in their imagination at 5, see it come to life, experience it with their parents, just a storybook. But to be able to see that sort of possibility, I think, unleashes maybe future creativity where a kid might say, yeah, I could do anything. I just, kind of grew up that way where I thought of something and kind of made it work and made it happen. So, and, we also do a lot of offline stuff. I don't think the world is just online and AI. So we try to do a healthy mix of both.
That's awesome.
That's a beautiful place to end.
It's a beautiful place to end.
Really, really beautiful.
Hey, thank you so much for coming on. Very, very inspiring to hear what you've done. Congratulations, man.
That was a really fun conversation.
Yeah, really.
Hopefully, Humza, we can add 1% more to your fame profile through this episode.
Well, listen, it's an
You're
honor.
amazing.
It's an honor talking
You're
to you guys. I think kind of the world you sit in and all of the things that you see, and I listen to some of your, I didn't get through all of them. Obviously, there's actually a lot of great content on this stuff, but I listened to a couple of them, and it's fascinating. It is really fascinating. So thank you very much for the opportunity and for creating space for me to be on here. It's an honor.
You're amazing. I mean, what an amazing guy, right?
He's such an incredible person. I mean, like it's so nice to see and hear the energy of people who have ideas and have had like a long and cool career, but probably become more of a manager. Basically going like, hey, this is an opportunity to go back and get my hands dirty. And you can always like feel the energy, right? Like, I'm like, hey, I'm actually able to actually do this stuff now again.
He said it's like going back to my 25-year-old self, which I just love. It's a cool way to think about it. I think it does beg the question. I mean, we've talked a lot about what does it take to build the capability in the organization. And to me, to have a credible, technically minded, but also business savvy leader like Hamza, I mean, what we didn't even get into, and Henrik, I kept wanting to, but the conversation didn't go there. But he's a very successful founder. He's sold businesses. He's an entrepreneur, right? And we didn't even get it. I was hoping when I asked him at the end about skills that he would kind of get into entrepreneurial resourcefulness, because I think it's actually a part of
But
the
the interesting
equation.
thing, he mentioned three things. He says you need to have good technical understanding, and then you have to be able to basically get the people together. You need to be able to attract people, and then you have to bridge into the domains like the CMOs.
Yeah.
And when I look at what are the technical chops that I always look for when we invest, it's basically first agitation. That's getting things done, which is kind of like having the technology, but also the energy to do
Wait,
it.
just to be clear, you didn't say education, you said agitation.
I said agitation.
Yeah,
The
I just
agitation.
want to make that word clear because that's a really good word.
I look for people who have something that propels them forward, right? And clearly he did. And the second thing I talked normally about is what I call gravity. But that is so that you can gather people around you. Gravity to kind of hold a story, gravity to get other people to pay attention to what you're saying. And that's about recruiting people, recruiting sponsorship of ideas and stuff like that. And then he talks about bridging. I normally talks about resourcefulness, like being able to basically get a lot done with a little, because often you don't have that. And he obviously also just showed that in spade, right? He talks about like learning, spending 2 hours a day learning, but not in his day job time, right? But in his commute time, for example. But I do think that he is such a good example of these new technology leaders that are coming and having success because that they can bridge domain expertise, technology, experimentation, all these different things that historically was very defined as entrepreneurial, but I think now is becoming kind of the hallmark of an AI super leader.
Yeah. I love his continued emphasis on the one hand, mastering AI, and on the other hand, downplaying AI in the organization.
Yes.
I think the danger is to fall in the middle where you overhype AI and you undermaster it, right?
Yes.
But what he's done is he's mastered far more than most folks I see in organizations, And when I met him, I think I told you this before we were recording, when I met him in Toronto, we had lunch together and he's showing me stuff he's running on his phone. He's like, watch this. And he's speaking into his commute mode. Hey, would you add a feature of my app? Just brainstorm and decide what feature you want to add, then do it. And then we keep eating our sushi. And he goes, look at that. It just had this feature on
That's
my phone. Right?
incredible.
He's so deep. And yet I thought it was brilliant how he talked about his tactics in the organization are just forget AI. Like, what's the problem? What are you trying to do? And he's not leading with, okay, and now AI can help you. It's just, he's all about the how and understanding the what.
Another thing that I think he brought kind of forward to me was that you had these super users and you need spaces for them to play. And so for him, that was a portal that they created or a lab. I think other organizations have other way of doing it. And of course, you want to give everybody the opportunity to play with these things because that's how you find out where they are, but also, it's good for the organization in general. But I think one thing that was pretty profound is when you're then moving into the next phase where you're looking to get agentic upgrades to your organization, you're looking at workflows that you could basically put to code, then there has been this thinking that will just organically materialize. This will be a grassroots kind of thing. I think what he laid out is, no, this is something that is a capability of a specific subset of people. They will identify basically best practices or good ways of using AI, but super contextualized to the specific work that people are doing. And then you go back and saying, hey, salesperson, I have a better way of you making sales deck. Or, hey, marketing person, here's a really good way for you to access data. Instead of going like, and now we're going to learn how to prompt, and then, and so this just seems to be like a hyper efficient way to get people to use technologies because it's going to help them in their day job, not because it's technology for its own sake.
I think it'd be fun. I mean, maybe it's because I was with Bryce yesterday, but on one hand, you've got somebody like
Bryce
Bryce
from
who basically
Moderna for
says,
people who don't.
yes, because sorry, listen to that episode. He's great, but he is all about democratizing and enabling everybody, right? And Humza basically represents this other paradigm. I think it'd be fun. I'm proposing to you, and you can tell me whether you like it or not. You get the two of them on a call
Yeah.
and to talk about what is this groundswell, grassroots, bottom up? Because right, if you think about what Bryce did, they had a prompt competition. That's very different, by the way, than an idea competition, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
And on and on and on. I think it could be a super cool conversation. One thing I wanted to mention that I thought was really cool, especially if, we're going to do a little teaser trailer, so to speak, but I thought it was really cool how he mentioned that they've got this idea gen competition kind of inspired by Dig. But he said basically in the organization, they've used AI to create this, but he said they've got basically an idea competition platform where anybody in the organization can submit an idea and anybody in the organization can upvote or downvote like Dig. But then here's the thing. People listen to this. Once a quarter, we take the top 3 and we do a build in a day where each of the people who champion that idea gets to sit next to an agentically capable AI builder, and they go from concept to actual realized thing in a day. And to me, that is, if you don't have that mechanism of the build in a day, and he said, by the way, then there's a demo day the next morning, right? Which shows the organization, we value your ideas, we can materialize them. It matters what you vote on. You should bring the stuff that you can't build. Like, it creates all sorts of social momentum by having that. I mean, I think Henrik, when we talked to Wade Foster at Zapier, he talked about a hack week, and that's kind of a organizational layer. If there's enough people in the organization who are kind of capable of doing the quote unquote build in the day, you can do a hack week. But if there aren't people who are capable, I think to me, this was a really authentic mechanism for Humza and the MLSE team to say, we're not trying to get everybody to the point that they can build, but we want to have mechanisms where folks share their ideas. And then we know we have the capability to realize the best of those ideas. That to me is a very elegant mechanism. And we think about kind of culture transformation. It's really hard to overstate the importance of that kind of event and moment in what it does to the hearts and minds of the people of the organization.
100%. Maybe that's a good spot to stop. And then for the people who have not heard the conversation yet, they should definitely check it out because it's awesome. And for the people who have listened to the whole conversation and have reached this point, thank you so much for listening all the way through.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's it. And then, as always, if you have suggestions, comments, idea, we read all the stuff that people post on Facebook, and we're very happy with all the comments that people put on the various platforms. So thank you. Keep doing it, and promote, subscribe, like all this stuff.
Introduce us to your cool friends.
Yes.
We love that. We have people who go, hey, you need to talk to, and then you know what happens? We get Humza on the pod. Okay, this is what happens. We have friends who introduced us to Humza. Who should we talk to next?
And with that, we only have one thing left to say, and that is bye-bye.
Bye-bye.